I have been dating my blind date for half a year. He is a bit poor but gentle and obedient, except for being difficult to tame at night. I saw him coldly scolding the finance department manager without mercy. Others introduced him to me as the CEO of the Whites Group. At the age of 26, my grandfather urged me to go on blind dates. I was planning to just go through the motions, but unexpectedly found a suitable match on the first blind date. His name is Ray. On the blind date, he had a tall and slender figure, probably about 6 feet 6. Wearing a simple black t-shirt, it outlined a perfect inverted triangle body shape that exuded a charm that could make anyone weak in the knees at a glance. I watched him with his perfect physique and fell for him immediately. Who could resist a gentleman like him? He was a bit poor. I even bumped into him looking dusty coming out of a construction site while I was out shopping. I added him on message, chatted with him from time to time, and invited him out. He hesitated to accept my invitations at first, but once he did, one thing led to another. I always enjoyed teasing him, calling him brother in a flirtatious tone. Brother, I can't open this bottle cap. Brother, want to hang out tonight? Brother, your looks have captivated me. In reality, the most important reason I was with him was because he inherently respected women. During a casual date, I wore a short skirt that screamed sexy. I even got asked for my contact information by a passing girl. He looked at me with a lowered head so he could hear me clearly. Even stooping down to listen. A man passing by glanced at me and muttered, "Dressed like that, are you trying to seduce men?" Before I could react, Ray strode over to the man like a towering mountain at 6 feet 6. Say that again. How is she seducing anyone by dressing normally? You're here shirtless in the scorching heat. By your logic, aren't you trying to attract women? You're dressed so revealingly, how dare you comment on other women? He fired off 3 questions, rendering the man speechless. His girlfriend let go of his hand and slapped the man, saying, "You, a man, dressed this revealingly, who are you trying to seduce?" "We're over." The embarrassed man, about to retort, faced Ray's imposing arm and meekly scurried away. As Ray turned back, he caught me staring at him, and his face turned as red as a shrimp. Keeping a straight face, he asked, "Why are you looking at me like that?" I curiously gazed at his blushing ears and asked, "Do you think I look slutty today?" He sensually cleared his throat and earnestly replied, "No, you look beautiful. Well, then why can't you look at me? You're too beautiful. I don't dare to see you." A tall man was awkwardly evading my gaze under my pressure, speaking in a stammer that was out of character for someone with his height of 6 feet 6, making him seem more like a bashful young woman than a masculine figure. Even though we were together, I kept teasing him, only to be scolded by him. The next day, he'd sweetly comfort me again, acting as docile as a pet, much like a loyal wolf. I never learned my lesson and continued to tease him. But a wolf would always have its predatory instincts. Eventually, we reached a breaking point. He did his duties, and I did mine. One day, I returned home, and Ray had already prepared dinner. His lean waist was wrapped in a pink apron provided by the supermarket, and his towering frame pulled out a chair for me and planted a kiss on my cheek. His husbandly aura overwhelmed me. "Angela, you've worked hard," I smiled with a shake of the head, noticing a stain on his cuff and furrowing my brows. "Where have you been again?" Unable to provide enough financial support for him to open a store, he kept going to do construction work behind my back. With a stiffened body, unable to hide the truth from me, he reluctantly admitted to it. "Angela, I won't do it again next time," he said. Ignoring his wolf-like antics, I scoffed, "Tonight, you're sleeping in the guest room and copying those books 5 times. He hesitated. "Can I skip sleeping there and just do the copying? Are you trying to negotiate now?" I said, "Fine, you're sleeping in the guest room tonight and tomorrow." Ray quickly retracted, Okay, I'll copy." While he peeled the shrimp for me, he asked, "How is it at White's Group today?" Eating the shrimp, I half-heartedly mentioned, "I start officially tomorrow." The salary at White's Group lives up to its reputation, $10,000 a month. In no time, my bowl was filled with neatly peeled shrimp. Ray tried to add more but was stopped by me. "Aren't you eating?" He nodded, and with his tall figure hovering over, he sensually licked his lips, now slightly oily. "These are delicious," he said. I looked at him in surprise, only to throw a cushion at him and exclaim, "Ray, I'm already eating. Can't you stop trying to steal my food?" "No one, not even my man, can take my food from me." Ray caught the cushion she threw, staring at me emotionlessly for a few seconds before tightly clenching his fist. Trying to maintain my tough demeanor, I asked, "What are you looking at?" Do you think I have a bad personality? Feeling slightly annoyed, I regretted exposing my true self. Amidst this realization, I struggled to keep up my stern expression, and it became increasingly challenging as he knelt in front of me, squeezing my cheeks with his fingers. With a slightly stalkerish look, he said gleefully, "You look adorable with that pout." Uncomfortably, I turned my head away. Adorable how? I'm angry. He lifted his head and asked, "Angry at what?" With a relaxed expression on his face. From that angle, the aggression from his single eyelid was lessened, turning him into a large wolf dog, obediently following its owner's commands. Growling playfully, I punched his chest, causing him to pretend to be struck and fall back with a smile. "You're too strong. This punch caused me internal injuries." "You're such a tough cookie," he said, clearly enjoying the playful banter. That night, I watched as Ray obediently went to the guest room before being ambushed by him once again. "This is your workspace, Angela. Let's go meet the CEO first." After the introduction from the HR manager, I followed him to the 50th floor. As the elevator opened, I heard the cold voice of a man before even stepping closer. "What are these plans you've submitted? All the promises you made with such passion, but when it comes to execution, it all falls apart. Feeling comfortable? Don't come at me with excuses. We're not close." His voice sounded eerily familiar, resembling the voice that had whispered Angela in my ear previously. Through the gap in the door, I saw the man sitting in the CEO's chair. His hair neatly combed back, high cheekbones, a sharp nose obscured by wire-rimmed glasses, and a penetrating gaze as he sternly reprimanded the finance manager. The word Ray quickly popped into my mind. I stared at him, struggling to connect the water cement worker who used to call me his wife and this fiercely commanding man that he murmured sternly between corrections, "This is our CEO." The CEO of the Whites Group, who took over the family business at just 16 or 17, survived among wolves, tigers, and leopards and rose to power. Within 3 years, he completely dominated the Whites Group, annihilating those who had opposed him, leaving families shattered and lives ruined. Hearing that he abstained from debauchery and refrained from indulging in extravagances, and after his leadership, Whites Group's assets doubled, making it his personal empire. The rest of the conversation became incomprehensible as the man inside glanced over, his sharp eyes locking onto me with precision. "Why aren't you coming in?" he asked. The HR manager ushered me inside, quickly clarifying, "Our CEO doesn't go by that name. Angela is new here, she doesn't know about you." The man interrupted his chatter and looked at me seriously, saying, "Raymond, that's my name." When I nodded, Raymond frowned and exchanged a glance with the HR manager, then returned to work. As I left his office, I looked back and saw him focused on editing documents, most likely dealing with a challenging problem. His cold eyes, pursed lips, and indifferent demeanor exuded an aura of restraint and aloofness. Before officially starting work, I understood my job position and duties, then left the company. Checking the time and seeing it was almost 5, I decided to stop by the construction site where Ray worked. Upon arrival, I saw him pushing a cart next to the excavator. Ray's tall and sturdy physique, coupled with his job site activities, made him look exceptionally impressive. Even in his work overalls, he moved smoothly and effortlessly, displaying a sexy aura. Whites Group's Prince and Ray are two completely different people, two different styles, and my doubts in my heart have dissipated by half. The workers around me glanced at me and whispered to Ray. He looked over and his pitch-black eyes lit up a bit. I smiled and waved casually at him. Ray took 3 quick steps and was right in front of me the next second. He leaned against the railing, a wave of hot male hormones coming at me, smiling brightly. "Beauty, alone?" I leaned forward and also smiled. "Hi, handsome, waiting for me here specifically. I'm divorced with 2 kids, you're not losing out, would you consider it?" Ray pretended to contemplate for a few seconds. "Free food and accommodation? Deal," I said cheerfully. He nodded and thought for a moment before asking, "Is Angela here?" "If Angela's here, I'm going. Angela has been eaten by a big fish, now there's only the big fish left." I teased him deliberately. Ray raised his eyebrows, revealing his white, sharp canines. "No problem, I'll just eat you then." I gave him a glare and received his indulgent smile, as he was about to touzle my head, but he withdrew his hand halfway. His hand was sweaty. "I'll go take a shower first, and then come back." I nodded, and he quickly ran back, his tank top fluttering in the wind, carrying a bit of a carefree smell. Ray took a shower and came out in just 7 or 8 minutes. Back at home, he went to cook, and I went to tidy up my closet. The closet was packed full, and I knew I would have more clothes added after working at White's Group for a while, so I had to tidy up. After a struggle with the clothes for a while, I naturally reached into the pockets of my pants to check if there was anything I hadn't taken out, and I found a cufflink. It was a men's cufflink, with a raised diamond cut from the surface with the texture of a pyramid, infused with the inspiration of the Egyptian pyramids, showcasing the wearer's elegant and noble male posture to the fullest. At a glance, I could tell that this was a custom cufflink, requiring customers to make an appointment a month in advance and become a member of that luxury store to be eligible to purchase it. So, why would a cufflink like this appear in the pocket of Ray, who was working at the construction site? My suspicions began to grow. During dinner, I casually asked, "Mid-Autumn Festival is coming soon. Should we go visit your family?" Ray's hand paused imperceptibly as he was picking up the food. "Let's do it another day. I need to have them properly prepare for your formal visit. After all, when such a beautiful daughter-in-law enters the house, they have to prepare a decent meal." He smiled. I nodded, watching him prepare to pick up the last piece of fish, my eyes fixed on him, trying to signal him with my eyes not to touch that piece of fish. Ray raised an eyebrow as if he didn't understand my expression and picked apart the fish quickly. Just as he was about to put it in his mouth, I went for it and snatched the food like a hungry wolf. Ray dodged smoothly, caught my waist, and kissed me. "If you want to kiss me, just say it, no need to be so aggressive." The man smiled brightly, obviously well prepared. I glared at him fiercely. "Are you going to give me some or not?" Just as I was about to get angry, he took the fish and fed it to me. "Eat, Angela. All the bones have been picked out for Angela. Hurry and eat, Angela." I rolled my eyes without any dignity, sat back down to continue eating, feeling like I had overthought it. Even though my family had a place in the business world, there was hardly any significant conflict of interest with the Whites. The more I thought about it, the more I felt that the similarity between Raymond and Ray was just a coincidence, and I had selectively forgotten the more likely possibilities. Time went by quickly, and I had been at White's Group for almost a month. I spent most of my time in the office designing clothes, drawing. And the colleagues around me were often seen, but I hadn't seen Raymond again. "Angela, there's a meeting later that you need to attend," the assistant announced as she entered. I was busy drawing with my head down and didn't notice the assistant mentioning that Raymond would also be present. When I responded, the assistant left. I arrived at the meeting room on time, and as soon as I walked in, I saw him, the stern-faced master. The stern-faced master was the nickname given by the company for Raymond privately because he always had a stern face and a sharp tongue. I greeted Raymond and sat down. His gaze lingered on me for a second before moving away. The meeting was related to the new clothing line that White's Group was preparing to launch. The manager was speaking passionately, and I was doodling while taking notes. I accidentally dropped my pen and had to crouch down to pick it up. As I stood up and looked ahead, I saw Raymond. Coincidentally, he was rolling up his sleeves. I didn't think much of it until I saw the cufflink on his sleeve, and it was exactly the same as the cufflink I had found in Ray's pocket. "Angela, do you have any thoughts?" The vice president asked kindly, with a hint of schadenfreude in his gaze. I understood where his hostility was coming from, as this managing director position was meant for his nephew, but I suddenly took over. Even though I had a prestigious academic background and had won many awards internationally, he still couldn't stand me. Ignoring his expression, I walked straight to the projection screen with a USB plugged in containing our fashion design works. After explaining from design concepts to final designs, it had been over 10 minutes. I slightly bowed to indicate the end of my presentation. A round of applause followed, with the meeting participants praising my work one after the other. "Well done," Raymond finally spoke, and everyone instantly quieted down, hoping the stern-faced master would go easy on me with his sharp tongue. "Not bad at all," Raymond nodded in approval. "It seemed like it was a wise choice for White's Group to hire you." Surprisingly, the stern-faced master didn't unleash a barrage of criticism, leaving everyone in the room almost dropping their jaws in disbelief. But then, a thought crossed my mind: can this newcomer compete with the experienced ones, like him? In an instant, I felt the sympathetic looks from my other colleagues towards me. "Thank you for the compliment, Raymond." I deliberately walked past him, pretending to casually glance at the mole on his neck. The next second, my mind went blank. There was a mole on Raymond's neck that was exactly the same as Ray's. In countless nights, I had touched it countless times. How could I be mistaken? Even identical twins couldn't have such a 99% similarity. I sat back down, lost in thought for a few seconds, and video called Ray. Amidst the ringing of the video call notification, I saw Raymond subconsciously look nervous when seeing me. Seeing that I wasn't paying attention to him and seemingly didn't notice what was happening on his end, he quickly pressed a button to turn off his phone. I looked at the phone, pretending to be surprised that the call wasn't answered, and after pondering for a moment about why there was no response, I put the phone back in my pocket. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Raymond subtly let out a sigh of relief, and I smirked inwardly. Playing the role of a stranger, huh? I'll let you play enough. When I got back home, I massaged my throbbing temples, and a large hand covered mine, helping me massage my head. Was work busy today? Ray asked softly, and I slowly opened my eyes, finding a man's chest before me. The gentle touch felt comforting, and Ray looked down to see my hand on his heart. Sensing something off, he asked, "What's wrong?" His heartbeat, connected to the faint muscle movements, made me ask myself, is this person truly sincere towards me? Meeting his concerned gaze, I got my answer. Of course, he was sincere. For the past half year, in material and spiritual matters, Ray had never mistreated me. Even though he worked construction and only made $4,000 to $5,000 a month, he was willing to spend that on taking me to the Western restaurant I had longed for. Setting aside the fact that he wasn't short of money, let's talk about other incidents, as these things couldn't be replaced by money. I was someone who could act on a whim, suddenly wanting instant noodles in the middle of the night, tossing and turning in bed, refusing to make it myself. Ray was woken up by my whining. In the dead of winter, wearing a pair of boxers, he went to make instant noodles for me, then coaxed me into eating. There were no words of resentment or complaints. He just told me eating instant noodles was bad for your health, try to eat less, and said he could make me whatever I wanted. Similarly, one day, we stayed up until 3 a.m, and suddenly I wanted crayfish. I had to have it. I knew I was being unreasonable, but in order to avoid conflict, I said I would go buy it myself. After sharing this idea, got dressed, ready to go downstairs and take a taxi. Ray brought his electric scooter and stopped in front of me, smiling. Beauty, alone? That night, Ray drove me all around the city and finally, in a place more than 30 kilometers away from home, found a late-night street food stall that was about to close. It was windy at the time. I held a bag of hot crayfish in my hands, leaning against his broad back, feeling a warmth in my heart. Ray, does your dad have any children left outside? I jokingly said. Ray continued to massage his temples, his expression unchanged, but after spending half a year with him, I could see his jaw tensing, understanding that this was a nervous movement for him. No, they're busy with their careers, no time for unnecessary things. I nodded knowingly, squinted my eyes for a moment, and suddenly said, Ray, I hope you don't keep anything from me. Ray's body stiffened imperceptibly for a second, and he responded in a low voice, Ray never lies to Angela. Ray doesn't lie. Is it Raymond who lies? I was a little annoyed. This dog man, planning to deceive me, right? The more I thought about it, the more annoyed I became. I got up and pounded his chest hard. Get lost, you dog man. I'm going to take a shower. Ray, holding his chest unaffected, watched my annoyed figure and fell into thought. The next day, I wore a tank top with a white knit cardigan on top, a denim fishtail skirt on the bottom, highlighting my figure and adding a touch of softness. Ray's large hand held my waist, leaning down to kiss me, but with a height difference of 28 centimeters, I had to lift up on my toes. Just as we were about to kiss, I suddenly slapped my head. I forgot, today I have an important document to hand over. Let's kiss another time. I blew him a flying kiss and left, leaving Ray standing there dumbfounded. At the office, I heard the secretary of the CEO inquire if there were any important documents to hand over. I gestured towards the documents and smiled, thinking to myself, did you really think I was just joking? I came prepared. I went up to hand it over just as I needed to report the situation to the CEO. I took the initiative to ask. Within a minute, the assistant came over, looking surprised as he said, the CEO wants you to go up. I nodded and took the CEO's private elevator up to the 51st floor. Come in, a deep male voice sounded, and I pushed the door open. Raymond, here is the document you requested. Raymond pushed his wireframe glasses, and his sharp gaze was somewhat obscured by the glasses. Good. After handing over the document, I started my act, talking about the contents of the document while occasionally adjusting the stray strands of hair on my forehead, straightening my collar, or touching my wrist. Every movement carried a hint of subtle seduction, but it was not obvious, and only someone attentive could notice. However, Raymond took the bait. I suddenly realized that I must have been blind the first time I met Raymond. This guy was so fake, he hadn't changed any of his small habits, and he still managed to fool me back then. For some reason, he seemed slightly thirsty, his Adam's apple sliding down his throat, emitting a faint sound. Raymond, are you thirsty? Do you need me to pour you a glass of water? I asked curiously while inwardly chuckling at his act. Raymond coughed unexpectedly and nonchalantly lowered his head to the papers, saying seriously, "I am a bit thirsty, thank you, Angela." I snorted inwardly but didn't rush to expose his facade of abstinence. I turned and went out to pour water. As soon as I closed the door, I heard the man inside take a deep breath. I couldn't help but smile with a sly grin. In the following days, I continued to play with Raymond. If it wasn't in his office where I would rumple my hair into a ponytail or accidentally smudge my lipstick, even when I drank water, Raymond would covertly watch me, clenching his jaw and occasionally sliding his Adam's apple. But if we were at home, the supposed wolf disguised as Ray would have pounced on me by now. However, he was Raymond. Every time I pretended to notice something, Raymond remained expressionless, even buttoning his collar to the top, emitting an aura of abstinence, which was a far cry from a man's true inner thoughts. Angela, do you have more to do? If not, you can leave now. Raymond heartlessly gave me the eviction notice. I saw his eyelashes tremble a few times and knew that this dogman was reluctant to let me go but couldn't break his facade of abstinence, so he resorted to pretending. I inwardly snorted but said lightly, "No, I'll leave first." As I closed the office door, my phone immediately buzzed with messages. "Angela, are you there? Angela hasn't come to see me in days. I feel powerless even to work. Did I do something wrong? Angela doesn't want to talk to me. I'm dumb. As long as Angela speaks up, I'll definitely change." Seeing that I still didn't respond, Ray hesitated to bring up the topic, only asking, "Angela, what do you want to eat tonight?" Because Ray was keeping secrets from me, I decided to play along with him, so I had been neglecting Ray at home, even avoiding going to the construction site where we used to spend time. Ray was a smart man and sensed my unusual behavior, leaving him feeling insecure. So at night, he would cling to me tightly before he could fall asleep. I've been quite busy lately. There's a lot of work at the company, and the design department is planning to launch a new product. Don't overthink it. I've been craving steak lately. I made up my mind and breezed past the topic. Ray instantly replied, "All right, I'll go buy it after work." I had indeed been busy as White's group was preparing to launch a new clothing line, and as the design department director, I couldn't afford to slack off. For the past month, I led the team in designing clothing suited for modern women, with bold and sophisticated styles. The outfits featured layered flowing skirts on top and simple elegant trousers underneath, suitable for both indoor and outdoor wear, attracting attention wherever worn. This new product was targeting women who valued clothing freedom, as the detachable skirts signified women's freedom in dressing. It stood for a message that women could wear what they pleased, breaking away from conventional stereotypes. The forward-thinking design and unique meaning undoubtedly gave White's group a strong foothold in the fashion industry. One day when I arrived at the office, I sensed a different atmosphere in the office. I casually asked an assistant about it, but the assistant avoided my gaze and stuttered, unable to explain. "Angela, there's an emergency meeting at the company, and they need you to attend." A person who entered not too far away informed me. I responded and glanced at the assistant, clearly hearing the assistant sigh in relief as I left. I pushed open the meeting room door, finding Ray, the vice president, and team leaders from Design Group 1 and 2 inside. Ray raised his eyes slightly, the icy white light casting sharp shadows on his jawline. The atmosphere in the meeting room was tense, with everyone looking at me as if I were the accused. The vice president sneered, a mocking curve appearing at the corner of his mouth. "You are even later than Ray. I thought you were a big shot." I naturally took a seat, raising an eyebrow, and without fear, retorted, "Raymond is certainly understanding and doesn't care about such trivial matters. But Vice President's son, there are things you can learn from Raymond." Seeing that he almost labeled himself as a bad person, the vice president was irritated for a moment, but then his complexion softened. One of the team leaders coughed. "Let's discuss the issue about the leakage of the new product first." It was then I learned what had happened. Shortly after White's group launched its new product, a rival company released a similar product with the original design produced a week before White's group's release. Negative reviews about White's group skyrocketed online, and the purchase evaluations were mostly negative. The vice president spoke up. "Angela, you were solely responsible for this project, and only you had access to the original design. Why then did the rival company have their own original design?" Vice President's son's statement implied that there were two possibilities: either the design was leaked, or I sold the design to the rival company. The vice president clearly leaned towards the latter. I chuckled, "And what does that prove? If I had done it, then I'm a suspect, right?" Then I would say to Vice President's son, "Have you ever even seen the design? And based solely on a picture, you managed to recreate the design and sell it to the rival." What do you think of this possibility?" With that remark, the vice president was left speechless. "You, vice president's son's fingers trembled, but ultimately he turned to Raymond. "Raymond, this is the good talent you hired." Raymond opened his eyes, staring expressionlessly at vice president's son, his lips twitching slightly. Just as vice president's son thought he was going to turn the situation around, the insidious man didn't resort to sarcasm but instead defended me. "I don't think Angela could have leaked the design." With those words, he proved my innocence. I smirked triumphantly, thinking, considerate of you to see it that way. Before speaking, let the long dormant brain awaken slightly and then speak. Raymond coldly glanced at the vice president and uttered with a biting tongue. As the vice president tried to say something, he met Raymond's warning gaze, which silenced him instantly. "This matter will be handled by Angela," Raymond said in a detached tone, not allowing any room for objections. I scanned the room, lowered my voice, and exuded an intimidating aura. "I am the head of this project. If there are issues with this project, naturally, I am a suspect. But every new product is like our child, and I will find the traitor. I won't spare any of them when the time comes." After the meeting, I hurried to Raymond's office. "Raymond, thank you for trusting me." Raymond's hand holding the papers paused for a moment, then resumed signing, his tone even. "Trust in one's subordinates is the most basic thing." Upon seeing Raymond's indifferent appearance, and remembering how he stood by my side without hesitation earlier, I suddenly wanted to tear down that facade. "Raymond, do you have anything else to say?" I asked. Raymond sensed something was off in my tone and looked up to me, the smooth surface of his glasses reflecting some light under the lamp. "What do you mean?" He slowly ventured to speak. I directly approached him, snatched off his gold wire-rimmed glasses, and grabbed his chin to force him to raise his head. "Prince of the Whites Group, what are you pretending to be?" I questioned. Although I had a smile on my face, Raymond felt the danger. He tensed up all over, and after a while, said, "You already knew, that's why you've been avoiding me. Right?" I almost burst out laughing. How could Ray be focusing on this at a time like this? Even more so than me, the one in love. So what if I did? "You lied to me for a whole half year." I tilted my head, getting close to him. "Raymond, did you lie to me for fun?" Ray tightly held onto my hand, looking somewhat overwhelmed. His throat rolled once. "I didn't mean to deceive you purposefully, I didn't think that far." "And what about now?" I interrupted him. "If I didn't expose the truth, were you planning to deceive me forever?" Ray's thin lips moved slightly, but no sound came out. I was disappointed. Had he come clean now, I wouldn't react like this. I had given him a chance before, and now was another. I didn't care about our different backgrounds, whether he was poor or rich. Deceiving me was forgivable, but being caught and continuing to hide the truth was something I couldn't accept. I pulled away from his hand, saying coldly, "Ray, let's take a break for a while." After speaking, I turned and walked away, leaving Ray looking bewildered at my receding figure. Later on, I intended to stay in a hotel, but Raymond stopped me, insisting that if I were to stay, it would be where he stays. In the end, neither of us moved out, not speaking to each other at home, both coming and going early and late, but frequently encountering each other at work. Today, I ran into Raymond again. My assistant nudged my hand. I followed her gaze, only to find Ray looking at me. Our eyes met for a second, and I quickly looked away. Ray now seemed to be showing his true self. Gone was the cheap grandpa vest, and the intense hormone smell that came with his work was nowhere to be found. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, the blazer fitting snugly on him, with a stern look in his eyes that could make one quiver. Lately, Raymond had given up on using the executive lift and instead started using the staff elevator. My assistant whispered. A colleague leaned into gossip. "You know what? He's experiencing regular life." I chuckled internally, standing closer to them. How is this experiencing life? It was clear that he was here just to have a chance encounter. Not long after I settled at my desk, my assistant called me to say that the CEO wanted to see me. Curious about the reason, I went up to see him. Upon opening the door, I found his usually cold and minimalist office adorned with fresh flowers everywhere, from the dark sofa to the wall paintings, injecting vitality into the dreary space. Ray approached me slowly with a pale yellow rose in hand. "This is for you," he said, meeting my gaze. His eyelashes quivered as he spoke. I extended my hand to receive the flower, taking in its fragrance before looking up at him. But surprisingly, Ray was too nervous to say anything, a contrast from his usual sharp-tongued self. Thank you, I said, but then stayed silent. Ray, in a rare moment, remained silent too. If there's nothing else, I will be going, I added. As soon as I finished speaking, I turned around and left, catching a glimpse of a towering man behind me, resembling a wet dog in the rain. His fur was soaked, clearly having been caught in the downpour. Closing the door behind me, I gently rubbed the rose petals, soft to the touch, and unconsciously a smile formed on my lips. From then on, I kept receiving gifts from Ray, ranging from vibrant roses to delicate bracelets, even street food like freshly cooked duck or biscuits. I casually mentioned I wanted to try. Our relationship gradually warmed up. Each morning, I would find breakfast on my table, and we would greet each other whenever we crossed paths. The traitorous assistant who leaked the design draft was found, manipulated by the vice president of a rival company. Ray swiftly took action, resulting in the dismissal of the vice president, leading to a corporate restructuring. Reflecting on this, I handed him my resignation letter. The next day, when I went to his office to see him, Ray wasn't there. Upon opening the resignation letter, I found that he had already signed it. Underneath, there was a note that read, "I will never be a cage to confine you, but rather a stepping stone, your support, and shield." I stood there in shock for a moment, then abruptly covered my mouth, tears welling in my eyes. He knew. He remembered when I jokingly mentioned creating my own brand one day. He kept it in mind. Where is Raymond? I asked my assistant. She subtly nudged her glasses, knowing about my relationship with Ray due to his frequent visits. Raymond hasn't shown up for work today. Yesterday, he seemed to be coughing again, she added. Upon hearing that, I hastened back home. Upon entering the guest room, I noticed a lump under the covers. The room was dimly lit, and as I turned on the light and lifted the blanket off, I discovered Ray lying there. His eyes were shut, his forehead drenched in sweat, and his eyelashes adorned with droplets. His cheeks and ears were all red, and as I touched his forehead, I sensed the high temperature, indicating a fever. Ray, I gently tried to wake him, unable to move his hefty frame. Eventually, he regained consciousness at my calls, and as he opened his eyes, he saw me. Before I could say anything, he immediately held me tightly in his arms. Angela, don't leave me. I'll be good, he repeatedly uttered, his tone pleading. I attempted to free myself, but to no avail, so I pretended to be in pain. Let go, it hurts. Ray quickly released his grip, nervously asking, where does it hurt? Let me help you. I wiped the sweat off his forehead, gently coaxing, it doesn't hurt, I was just kidding. You have a fever, shall we go to the hospital? Looking up at me, tears glistened in his eyes, his voice hoarse as he said, no, Angela won't want me. He clung to me again, portraying a sense of insecurity. I saw Angela 5 years ago. Recounting the past, he said he had met me 5 years ago. Raymond was his name, but in his life, his family called him Ray. During university, he was drawn to me during a speech competition, and it felt like his heartbeat had skipped a beat then. It was probably love at first sight, but due to his uncertain position in the company, he refrained from approaching me. After I graduated, my father's control of the company made us wealthy, but he had multiple affairs, which eventually led to my parents' death in a car accident. I was left alone with my grandfather. At that time, I detested wealthy men due to my father's actions, even joking with my friends about finding a poor man to support. I made ambitious statements when I was young, and those with ulterior motives took them seriously. You said you liked the poor. I felt a pang of fear. That's not true. Now, I only like those who treat me well. Ray buried his head on my shoulder, saying in a low voice, I didn't intentionally deceive you. When we met, you didn't ask. Later, when you saw me coming out of the construction site, you assumed I was poor. As he continued speaking, his voice grew hoarse. I was scared. I was afraid of losing you if I told you the truth. I like those who are sincere and passionate about me. I gently stroked his head. Are you? Our distance diminished, yet there was a sense of closeness. Ray's face was filled with sincerity, his eyes slightly red. I am Angela. And with a tender kiss in the corner of my eye, he said, I sincerely and passionately love you, forever. I threw myself into his arms, squeezing him so tightly that Ray struggled to breathe, tears flowing uncontrollably. Thank you, I said. At 20, Angela, left without parental care after their death, became more unruly and impulsive. By 26, under Ray's love, she gradually matured and eventually became a successful global designer. One evening, he was late coming back, and I had bought groceries. Upon meeting, Ray naturally held my hand and inspected the groceries in my other hand. Angela, do you feel like having a salad today? he asked, suggesting his typical caring nature once more. I shook his large hand, admiring his neat and sharp profile. In a girlish manner, I teased, "No, I feel like having fish." The fish market always had that fishy smell that I disliked, fearful of it sticking to my clothes. I enjoyed eating it, but never cooked it myself. Especially after being spoiled by Ray and never having to cook. "Let's go buy some fish, Angela," he indulged me, always speaking softly and soothingly whenever I needed it. As we walked, Ray paused midway, asking me to wait as he entered a modest store with no sign displayed. I kicked the pebbles boredly, and just as I was about to fake complain about how slow you were, my words got stuck in my throat as I looked up. The flower buds were large and round, with layers of pale yellow petals gradually unfolding, their bright creamy color reminiscent of a cream mousse. Angel paired with Angela, a perfect match, I thought as I received the bouquet. Each flower bud was large and emitted a faint rose fragrance when I leaned in to sniff it. "Is this flower called Angel?" Ray held my right hand, lowered his head slightly, and said to me, "Yes, Angel, you're my angel." Upon hearing these words, my heart felt sweet and tender. No wonder I instantly fell in love with this flower at first sight. The rose's meaning is beautiful love.